On the subject of usability, this thing isn't labeled. There's no indication of what this thing should actually be. So it seems like we need to label this rascal. There's a couple ways we could do that. We could actually add a label element. And I'm going to do that real quick, and then I'm going to do it another way, so you don't necessarily have to type along. We can add a label. And give it an attribute 4, and set that equal to the same thing as the flick name. And what that does is actually attach this label to that. It won't make any difference in the way it's presented. It'll look exactly the same on the page. But now there's actually, under the hood, a connection between those two things, which can be useful. For example, for people with disabilities who are using some sort of assistive technology, like a screen reader, if they can't actually see the page, but they have a screen reader and they can tab around to different fields. If they then tab into this input, how's it going to tell them what that is if it doesn't have a label? And if you just stick a label on there but don't tell what it's a label for, how's it going to know? So by doing this, it'll actually know this field is flick name. So whatever we type in here, like flick name, or whatever we want to call it, now the screen reader would even know that that field goes with that label. But it looks exactly the same even if we didn't include 4. But for accessibility's sake, we absolutely should. And for some things like check boxes and radio buttons, making the label actually for a particular element will mean you can click the label instead of having to click into the little tiny checkbox. You can click the label next to it. And boy, does it drive me crazy when sites don't do that. So they should be tarred and feathered, I tell you. No, I would never advocate violence. Anyway, don't be violent, kids. Stay off the drugs. Okay, another way to do the same thing. We could put a placeholder on here. So I'm getting an awful lot of attributes on this one input. So I'm going to go ahead and put some line breaks in here. Makes no difference. Put some line breaks in the middle of a tag. No problem. If I do that, I generally make the closing angle bracket line up with the opening one. So I'll add another one in here called placeholder. Also, the order of the attributes makes no difference. But I like to put Boolean attributes like autofocus either at the beginning or the end so that those with values are here. So placeholder. I could put enter a flick. Refresh the page, and now it says enter a flick in there. And as soon as I start typing, that'll go away, right? Seen that before, so that's a placeholder. You can just use the placeholder attribute. I like it. Placeholders are not perfect accessibility-wise, but they're better than nothing. I can't remember exactly what the issues are with them, but they work most of the time. Placeholder and autofocus, by the way, are both things that were added in HTML5, which is now very widely supported. If you were using an older browser, it just wouldn't autofocus and the placeholder would not show up. So what did we do? This commit will add a placeholder to flick name. Command enter or control enter to commit. Push to actually sync it with GitHub. Questions about that? Labels and placeholders?